Hello everybody. A couple of months ago, I posted a survey on YouTube asking you all what gardening topics you were most interested in. I threw vertical gardening on there just sort of on a whim, but I was shocked by how many people responded and said that was the topic they were most interested in. Now, I've not really talked a lot specifically about vertical gardening, with the exception of maybe how I trellis my cucumbers and my indeterminate tomatoes. So I thought I would take the opportunity today to share with you how I am growing up in my garden. Now, I'd love to hear from you also. If you all have some creative solutions for growing vertically in your own gardens, be sure to drop a line in the comments below and let me know about it. And a big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Shaker and Spoon. Let me just start by saying, I didn't used to grow much of anything vertically. Space has never been a big challenge for me, especially over at my parents' gardens. So most of the time, I would just let crops ramble all over the ground and basically go wherever they wanted to go. But through the years, I have found huge benefits in getting my plants up and off of the ground. Now, for folks who are tight on space, that smaller footprint that growing vertically provides has obvious benefits. But for me, getting my plants up off the ground and providing them with more air circulation has cut back drastically on the issues that I typically have with things like fungal and bacterial pathogens, issues that tend to run rampant in our humid Midwestern summers. I also don't have near as many pests chewing on produce that is growing on the ground, and growing up makes that produce so much easier for me to pick. So let me show you what I am growing vertically and share a few mistakes that I have made along the way. In my newest bed in the front of the garden, I've got a lot of vertical growth going on, starting with these volunteer squash that are happy to make their way up this cattle panel arch. As we look around, you'll notice that I utilize cattle panels a lot in my garden. They're an extremely handy and versatile tool to have around if you got the means to haul them home. If not, just keep in mind that you can achieve a similar effect with smaller fencing sections or even with those vegetable netting trellises. I've got runner beans on this cattle panel trellis, and for crops like this that need a little extra height, I prefer to mount these panels a couple of feet up off the ground. Things like these beans will eventually send their runners up and find the bottom of the panel and climb up with no problem. But for crops that need a little extra help getting to the bottom of the panel, I simply use something like a bamboo stick and train the plant up until it reaches the trellis. Now I've got morning glories smothering the back fence here, and these will look beautiful when they're in full bloom, but this leads me to mistake number one, and that is not taking into consideration sun and shade when you're planning out how you will grow vertically. So when I built this space, what I wanted was a garden room where the vertical growth would provide the walls essentially, which I achieved, but I did not fully take into account the amount of shade that these morning glories would provide. So you can see I've got little miniature sunflowers down here. Now this particular variety is one called Orange Hobbit, and they're doing okay given the amount of shade that they're receiving from the morning glories, but they would look a lot better if I had them planted in true full sun. I constantly have to remind myself to think about mature height and size when I am putting little tiny transplants or even planting seeds out in the garden. On the back side of the morning glory wall are my trellised cucumbers. These are also on a fence made from cattle panel trellises, but in this case, I did not mount the panels up off the ground, and I am regretting that decision. Typically, I always do with cucumbers, but honestly, I just got lazy when I was putting these in, but I could definitely use the extra height. These babies have a couple more months of growth in them, and they're already up above the tops of the panels pretty significantly. But cucumbers are a prime example of a crop that I used to allow to just sprawl across the ground. I will never go back to that. They are so much nicer when grown vertically. Again, it helps with diseases, but it's so much easier to find and pick the cucumbers when they're grown like this. Now, I've primarily got full big vining types trellised here. So Supermax pickling cucumber, the old lemon cucumber, and then this Perseus, which is just a bit more of a restricted vine. But if you didn't have this kind of space, there are a lot of smaller bush cucumber type options available that you could do something similar with on a small scale. So something like bush salad cucumber or pick a little pickler, or if you wanted to go really small scale, this new quirk cucumber is a great option. I could have easily trellised 2 plants on either side of this little A-frame support. But this goes to show, again, it's so important to consider that mature size of your plant, which leads me to mistake number 2, and that is not providing proper support. This is of particular importance if you are growing big, top-heavy plants in an area where you're prone to pretty severe summer storms or high winds. Not a vining crop, but I learned my lesson the hard way with tomatoes. One summer storm is all it takes to topple plants that are top-heavy, loaded with fruit, if they are not given proper support. If you have to, reinforce the trellises or supports that you have with rebar or T-posts. A great example are these lovely, delicate little Gothic trellises that I bought with the intent of training my French melons up. Got these home, stuck them in the ground, and realized, yeah, these things are going down with the first storm that we have. So out came the T-post and the zip ties, because I've stumbled on mistake 2.5 too many times in my garden, and that is caring too much about what my supports look like. Because no, rusty old T-post or rebar is not the prettiest look ever. But once your plants are up and growing, no one is gonna notice what the supports underneath look like. I hate the look of most of my bare trellises in the garden. And for those who can afford beautifully crafted trellises that are basically artworks in their own right, or better yet, can craft their own, that is awesome. But for those of us who resort to repurposed junk or cheapy finds at garage sales, don't stress too much. Like I said, it'll be beautiful once your plants are growing up them anyway. And it sure beats having a lot of vines sprawling on the ground, at least in my opinion. And yet another usage of cattle panels. The only way that I will ever grow my indeterminate tomatoes are on cattle panel trellises. Check out the video linked above to see my whole process in detail. It helps with disease issues. It makes them so much easier to pick. And if you wanted an even more decorative look, you could easily do the same thing on a cattle panel arch trellis. Now, if you look really closely, you'll see these little Velcro tapes. This is an indispensable tool in my garden, and I use this Velcro tape on almost every plant that I grow vertically, with the exception of maybe morning glories, which I'm pretty sure would climb up me if I stood still long enough, so they don't need any extra help. I buy this stuff by the roll and simply snip off the amount I need as it's needed. And I save all the pieces at the end of the season because these can be reused again and again and again. Now you'll notice that some plants need a lot more help with support than others. So on my indeterminate tomatoes, I use a lot of Velcro tape to help train all the branches where I want them. For things like winter squash or gourds or cucumbers or melons, I don't need to use nearly as much because they have these natural little tendrils that want to grip to all surfaces anyway. So with the Velcro tape, I use it to secure and train parts of the vine just in the direction that I want it to go. This loofah gourd is a great example. This thing is a rampant self-supporting climber. I grow these every year, typically over my cattle panel arches, because this plant gives me really quick coverage. This year, I sort of ran out of room, so I stuck a couple of plants in this old log that we had, and this plant, as you can see, is happy climbing all over my perimeter fence. So it really needs no help with self-supporting, but it does grow crazy fast, and sometimes I have to take these vines and just kind of train them where I want them. Because, as you can see over here, the loofah plant will just kind of grab a hold of whatever is near, including these elderberries. So I just use my Velcro tape to attach it to the fence and keep it where I want it. And speaking of garden fence, mistake number 3 is not utilizing the garden fence. Now, this was just a dumb mistake on my part. My husband put up this whole perimeter fence around the garden to help keep critters out. And the first couple of years, I didn't even use it. I mulched around it to keep the weeds down, but I didn't really plant anything. Well, a couple of years in, I happened to have some melons planted in the back of the garden, and they happily climbed their way up the fence all on their own. Light bulb moment. Why am I not utilizing this valuable real estate? So if you've got a garden fence, plant stuff on it. Keep in mind, of course, the issue with shade that I mentioned earlier, but this can also be used to our advantage. If you've got tall vines covering your fence, plant something beside it that prefers or will tolerate partial shade. Even better, use it to your advantage when starting cool season crops this time of year. So things like beets and carrots and peas and leafy greens that don't love the heat and sun in August, give them a little shade with a neighboring plant on the fence. So learning from my mistakes, I've got things creeping all over the fence this year. In addition to the loofah gourd and the morning glories, I've got winter squash that are crawling up from the hugelkultur bed on the other side of this fence, runner beans and pole beans. And in addition, I'm using the fence to support things that aren't vining crops, but are quite tall. So things like my blackberries and my Jerusalem artichokes that otherwise would probably be toppled again by those summer storms. Now, a couple of other plants I am growing skyward include these delightful yard-long beans. Now take note, I could have just as easily planted these along the outside edge of my corn, as things like these yard-long beans, runner beans, or pole beans will happily climb up the stalks of the corn. Using living plants as trellises is a great tactic as long as the crop that is climbing is not overly aggressive. So in addition to corn, think about other plants with big sturdy stalks. So things like sunflowers and okra are great options. I've got moonflowers on the other side of this trellis. And over here, I'm using this small expandable teepee style trellis to grow my lemon drop watermelons. I had not grown this variety before, and I assumed when I read mini melons that the plants would be diminutive as well. So I opted for relatively small trellises. Needless to say, I probably could have gone a little bigger, but this still helps to get them up off the ground to some extent. Now, despite the trial and error and the mistakes that I've made, growing vertically is a method that I am absolutely smitten with. Besides the benefits to my plants, I love the look and feel that growing vertically brings to my garden. And there's not much better than sitting out here at sunset, enjoying the view and enjoying a drink. And that is why I am grateful for the sponsor of today's video, Shaker and Spoon. Shaker and Spoon is a monthly subscription service, and each month you receive a box with 3 unique recipes and the gourmet ingredients to make up to 12 cocktails. I simply provide my own favorite liquor. They make it so easy to create and enjoy unique cocktails, things I'd never try if left to my own devices. I'm pretty much just a bourbon on the rocks kind of gal, but Shaker and Spoon provides everything I need to shake it up a little bit. Now I've got the Bring On the Bourbon box here, and check out all of these cool ingredients. We've got strawberry rhubarb syrup, a little bottle of white sage hydrosol, this delicious looking honey pear premium reserve soda, and it comes with 3 recipe cards, but this one has got my name all over it. This is the Choco Factor, and it mixes bourbon with Oaxacan chocolate syrup, barrel-aged coffee bitters, and chili threads. So I'm gonna mix this cocktail up. So first I'm gonna add my liquid ingredients to a dry mixing glass. I've got 2 ounces of bourbon, 1/4 ounce of the Oaxacan chocolate syrup, and 3 dashes of my barrel-aged coffee bitters. Next, I fill the glass with ice and stir until the mixing glass feels ice cold. Now I strain into a rocks glass over a large ice cube. I don't have large ice cubes, so I'm using 2 smaller ones. I hope that's okay. And then for the aromatic finishing touch, I place a pinch of chili threads just on top of the large ice cube. And now we enjoy. Ooh, man, is that good. Smoky, sweet, a little bit spicy. I don't like my drinks on the sweet side, but this is just the perfect balance of all of those flavors. I am just gonna sit right here and enjoy this drink. But if you want to try mixing up your cocktail game, give Shaker and Spoon a try. Click on my link in the video description below and use my code Growfully to get $20 off your Shaker and Spoon subscription. And if you enjoyed today's video, please consider subscribing to my channel, Growfully with Jenna. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.